Yo, what's happening, Cap? Hey, look.
It's on a roll now. The machine's in progress. You can't stop.
The wheels are in motion.
You can't stop progress, okay? Doge is coming.
Doge.
Elon gon' get you. Don't even get caught looking like you're trying to do bureaucracy, dude, because you will not get away with it. Not to force you into a political corner here, but you know. Who did you vote for?
I know all the memes.
Yeah.
Oh, jeez. Yeah, you never know with that guy.
Wild card. You know, that's what every crew needs is a wild card.
Yeah, the thing is, like, you can meme on him and he's a good sport about it. I give him that.
He owns a very memey platform, so.
He does, yeah.
Hey, what's happening, Captain? I'm Captain Hardluck. Welcome to the What's Happening, Captain, the world's only podcast all about me. Hey, Captain Hardluck, hey, that's me. But on this show, I like to have guests and we chat it up and we talk it up. And people that have come by and supported me and they make content. And I guess content creators have podcasts so that they can have low effort content in bulk to distribute regularly. But you are a great guest and always been very gracious to me. Gothi Senpai, welcome.
All right, welcome everyone. Glad I can come on the show today. It's nice to meet everyone.
Again, you know, everybody knows everybody. Are there first time chatters here? Everybody knows. I don't even have the stream open. Go ahead.
I just assume that maybe somebody's, stopping by and coming for the first time,
Allegedly, I don't know. Maybe the algorithm will boost the latest YouTube episode and some new people will swing by and be intrigued by this band of merry folk that I've, acquiring. We're already talking about doing, getting other people that were on earlier episodes and doing group episodes. And we're recording live on Twitch, twitch.tv/CPT Captain Hardluck. Hey, that's me. And, we met because of old anime and we'll probably just talk about that. And it'll be a pretty chill episode, or maybe we'll just talk about raucous shit the whole time. I don't know. I don't really know. We haven't really had a chat before.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I met you by watching your stuff. I've watched it maybe a year ago when I started getting into Leiji Matsumoto's works, and I used your, I think it was your iceberg video on his multiple animes that he's worked on, and I used that as a blueprint to how I should watch his animes in order. There's no really definite order to watch him in, but the way you explained how each one, depending on which one you watch first, you would get a different perspective on the characters.
Mm-hmm.
Like, for example, I started with Galaxy Express, and I think you also started with Galaxy Express.
3-9 the movie, yes. But I was familiar with Star Blazers prior to that, which is the 70s anime that, like, one of the first 10 to make it to the States.
Oh, okay. But if you were to start with Galaxy Express, you wouldn't really know Tochiro, Hardluck, or Esmeralda's. Like, they'd all be.
Wait. You said Hardluck. I've infected Harlock's name amongst everybody that I talk to, and I have to correct everybody now because I'm like worried about the brand. I'm worried about the Harlock brand. It's definitely not the Hardluck brand. I'll tell you that. I wish, but I also don't like being forced to be a space pirate captain, anarchist in space, and fighting off and everybody hating you at some point and trying to kill you eventually. That probably gets a little old. Maybe a little old.
I mean, you could be his long lost brother for all we know.
Well, I did the Leiji Matsumoto hairstyle. I mean, a lot of anime tropes actually, like, Matsumoto is so obtuse looking compared to what you see in anime otherwise, or manga for that matter. And like the way he did eyes and the way he did hair and his mechanical design are all things that I think are kind of like his work is kind of like a genesis point for a lot of those things. Because anime eyes, they were there, but they weren't as like layered and dense, and it was this combination of like shoujo sparkly with this loose like shonen style. It's kind of interesting to me, the art style.
Yeah, especially for women, like how slender they looked, how slanted and long their eyelashes were. It's very majestic, almost elf-like, you know?
Well, the elf thing, I've talked about that on the podcast before, and I've talked about how Maetel is a bit, what is the elf, but kind of before people were just like, I'm going to wear a deer costume, there were elves. That's kind of how I feel
Yeah.
about, and what is the metaphor there is pretty obvious, right? The hunter
Right.
hunted relationship and the elfin nature and the romantic quality that he brought and the operatic quality that he brought because of his European influences are just, there's something really special about it. And to people who don't get it out the gate, it's kind of hard to get them on board. But if you resonate with that like primal romantic thing, it's really good.
Yeah, it's really hard to really grasp the inspiration behind the creation of Maytel, because when you look at it, she has like French influences and other influences from other cultures baked into one character. So there's so many dynamics with, the inspiration for Maytel.
Are you familiar with oh God, Marianne? Is it Marianne? Marianne of My Youth. Are you familiar with this movie?
No, I only know Arcadia.
Okay, Marianne Hold. I almost said Marianne Moore because I was thinking of Mary Tyler Moore, and that was wrong. But Marianne Hold was in a movie called Marianne of My Youth, a very useful, pilot for her. And Matsumoto saw this movie, and it was a French and West German film. They filmed it twice, which was like commonplace at the time to do a French and a German recording with people who were like bilingual. Or switch out actors or whatever. And so Matsumoto saw that movie when he was younger, and so her look, and then there's apparently a photo of his grandmother on like a train station in a fur coat, and then there's also something called Dr. Zhivago. Dr. Zhivago, which is a 1965 film, which is about like Russian doctor and this chick in the tundra and like trying to survive and maybe falling in love or something. And she's got this Maetel hat on and a fur outfit. And then also there's an episode. Do you know Jerry Anderson and Thunderbirds?
It sounds very familiar, but I don't think I've seen it.
Thunderbirds are go, and they'd have these long launch sequences, and they were marionette puppets. Action.
Okay, it's sounding more familiar. Yeah.
Yes. So before Thunderbirds, there was another show like that, but with an aquatic theme and submarines and ships, naval vessels, and they go ice skating during one episode, and this underwater sea chick who doesn't talk but like can breathe underwater, she's wearing like that Dr. Zhivago hat and like fur coat outfit, but it's in black or like dark green or something like that. And that came out like 10 years before Galaxy Express 39.
So do you think at the time it was like a fashion statement? Like it was like a popular style?
Well, it was kind of a throwback by the time Matsumoto uses it. And I think even in the 60s, like the 60s had all these new wild materials and they're like recreating old looks and there's synthetics. And I don't know if synthetic furs were around or not.
It's definitely a 70s thing
It's a 70s thing. Okay, so
for sure. Yeah.
like they have that. I think fur coats and like Maetel hats were a thing for a while, like up to the 60s maybe in the 70s, I don't know, but it was kind of a throwback, I think. Cuz then he
Yeah,
said
I can see that.
Matsumoto's grandma had apparently been in a similar outfit, but I don't know. I don't think we have that photo. So,
I also want to point out, have you seen a movie called On the Galactic Railway?
another anime?
It's a movie, it's a children's book, a really old children's book.
Yeah, A
And
Night on the
the
Galactic Railroad, I believe it's
yeah,
called.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. I don't know. I think Galaxy Express kind of helped with the visual of that movie because it's different from the book, but it's reimagined as something kind of like Galaxy Express.
Well, I've been through Matsumoto's anthology. Like, he has a list of his quote unquote complete works, or at least their inventory of his complete works on his website that I have Google crudely translate for me. And I've looked and seen it looks like he did something titled at least similar to that, or at least Google is translating it that way. And then I've seen things that, and I'm like, okay, is that it? And I feel like he did some sort of illustration work around that story at some public, for some publication. But I have a hard time piecing everything together. And the anthropologist I know that, has spoken with him is like hazy on what I'm talking about. And, RIP Matsumoto. So getting firm answers on anything now, like talk to his daughter and hopefully maybe she knows, how accessible is she? Toei's apparently handling everything. They haven't said anything since they launched an AI video that everybody got their fucking panties in a bunch over, which pissed me off. It's like, this is actually disrespecting the man who was more than likely enthusiastic about transhumanism. Like, everybody watches 3-9 and they're like, oh, well, he must have had strictly anti-transhumanism. It's not the case. Like, the transfer of his consciousness, I think that's something that he would think is cool, actually, in real life. He was more realistic about it. Like, these are inevitabilities. We're going to have to deal with them. Like, if you watch the 3-9 anime series, each episode is about dealing with future problems. Like, you have to move through them. And a lot of people realize, yeah, we've kind of gone astray, but you work with the problem. You don't, like, Tetsuro doesn't go through the galaxy, like, dismantling everybody's society or anything like that.
Right. I think Leiji was very progressive in the meaning behind his works because what's that one series? The one where the AIs the man machines are working with the other people on the ship together and he's struggling with the conflict between man and machine. You played the game of it before,
Oh,
Cosmo Warrior?
yeah, Cosmo Warrior Zero, where the guy's wife is killed by the Machine Man army, and then he falls in love with the Machine Woman.
Yeah, I would say that's the most progressive of his works with the meaning behind trying not to be afraid of progress. So like trusting the AI and just seeing where it goes. I feel like the entire series kind of struggled with the conflict, and that's kind of like the resolution, that series.
Well,
When
it's
one character can put his feelings behind what happened and tried to make it work.
there is an inevitability, and that's always kind of acknowledged through all of his works as he, progresses the time frame out further and further. And I think ultimately what resolves Cosmo Warrior Zero is like this greater, almost kind of like intergalactic threat that arises. Like in Galaxy Railways, that's what it ends up being. Like, everybody seems okay finally on Earth, and there's some machine men and this and that. But then there's just like, have you seen Galaxy Railways?
I have. I've seen season 1, I think.
Yeah, so you know what I'm talking about. There's a, interdimensional threat in that one. And it's just kind of
Yeah.
like
Mhm.
when you go enough time frame, time scale, and just like spatial, how much bigger can you get than interdimensional? What's beyond that? Matsumoto maybe didn't get to live long enough to think about that, to turn it into a Wagnerian opera.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to tell where the series was going at that point. I mean, all the resolutions have, we've seen everything come and go. I mean, at that point, they're just taking problems bit by bit with whatever comes their way.
Yeah. Well, it's just
Unless they
like
do another reimagining, like what was that one series? The Western spaghetti spinoff.
Gun Frontier.
Yeah, unless they do something like that in the future, like a spin-off series. I mean, I don't know where the direction would go.
Well, it would be great to go back to I believe it's Keisuke Masanaga as character designer. He did a great job of kind of turning the manga style into an animatable, modernized style, which I like in Gun Frontier. And just, it's an unresolved story, so I'd love to see more of it. I don't know how it would go down, how it would be received, but I'd love to see more of that. Fun fact, though, that is the first appearance in manga of Harlock and Totoro. That's the first time Matsumoto ever made those characters.
See, it's so interesting because we've already seen Totoro's mother from Galaxy Express, but I
Yeah,
think in the Gun Frontier, we see a sister, so there's more plot and it kind of
right.
conflicts. So I don't know. It's interesting.
Well, different expressions on the Ring of Time. All the thing is, we miss so much Matsumoto lore in the States because we don't have this dearth of manga, which is actually expertly crafted. And one specific keystone story is called Mirazer Bond. I don't know if you've ever seen that.
No, I haven't.
There is a. I don't think there's a scan. If there is, it's not in English, but there is kind of a summarization of it on a website. And essentially, this kid, his parents may be scientists or some shit, and they're dying, which happens in Queen Melania. And
Yeah, the beginning.
yeah, and there's some time travel shenanigans, and he goes through time with this chick, and just continually like jumping through all of these moments in time. And essentially, it's kind of saying this physics principle of physics, which is, or quantum physics rather, is just like all things in time have already occurred. But he conceptualizes it in these like rings, and just all moments kind of intersecting. It's the intersection of all these different time patterns, and everything's happening all at once. And that's kind of what happens at the end of Galaxy Railways too, with the really trippy sequence with the time lady. I don't know if you remember the time lady from Galaxy Railways. She was wearing blue.
Yeah, the lady with the blue hair that tells everyone where the problems are.
Yeah, sure.
She's She looks like a Maitelian or whatever they're called.
Yeah, Lama
From
Italian. Uh,
Yeah, yeah. She kind of has that feature,
yeah. Well, I guess the detractors might say that Matsumoto draws them all the same, and the tall, lanky, impossibly skinny and skinny thick, in the right drawings,
Yeah,
Matsumoto
yeah.
ladies. But I mean, you did it right the first time. Why you gotta? People always trying to mess with perfection. I don't. Now we got everybody ruining it.
I mean,
And
all you really need is a great backstory. I mean, all the characters look the same to an extent, but if the design works, why fix it?
I mean, change the hairstyles on any two people in any anime if they're the same sex, with relative same features, then they probably don't look that different. It's pretty standardized, you know?
Yeah, that's true. I'm also noticing a lot of the main characters, they seem to have like family problems, like the parents aren't really there. They have some kind of loss between the mother and father. Is there anything with Matsumoto, like with his, family situation kind of resembling that? Because
Yeah,
his father used to work in the military, right?
correct. Yeah, he flew planes for the Japanese military. He was trained by French pilots who sold them the planes, and that bit them in the butt a little bit. And Matsumoto's dad was out there flying, and when he came home, there were a lot of angry wives and detractors, and what you see in Cosmo Warrior Zero with uh, Warrius's PTSD and experiencing, people belittling him in either in real life or just in his mind, and being upset with him not being able to, preserve the lives of people's children and brothers and etc. etc. And, sending men to their deaths and the kamikaze stuff. So, Matsumoto apparently escaping fire bombings as a child, and it was difficult on their family. And, they had come from more affluence, so they were able to get by better, but probably still extremely difficult for the family. So, I mean, there's a lot of war trauma for that generation, very particularly.
Yeah, we especially see that from Arcadia of My Youth.
Yeah.
Um, like losing a hometown, losing a war, wars. A lot of those war stories from these works are probably real, like real stories he's been told by his father,
Well,
I
Arcadia in
think.
My Youth particularly has a lot of uh, stories from his World War II historical fiction, which
Mhm.
you're probably familiar with the Cockpit OVA.
I know of it. I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, so great collection of three stories there, and he drew many, many of these war fictions, and potentially sort of his mind going off between learning actual World War II history, World War One history, and stories his father told him and things like that. So he has a lot of those war stories, and those war stories leak into, are used by Toei to produce Arcadia of My Youth to a large degree. So the opening shots of a man, scaling this mountain range in an old timey plane. I forget what you'd call it right off the top of my head. You're probably familiar with that. And then the idea of the soldiers sacrificing themselves, I'll leave it at that. You're probably familiar with what I'm talking about in the context of Arcadia My Youth. Um,
Yep.
those are war stories that he wrote in manga form, and they were adapted for a Harlock tale.
I almost wonder if he made it a little bit fairy tale like, because the I forget her name, the witch that reappears in Arcadia of My Youth is kind of almost fairy tale like. How like fairy tales
Right.
have a magical antagonist that you visually can't see, but it's always present, and you're constantly running into this feud. Um, I wonder if it's because of a big conflict of you know, describing war situations, because there was like a certain symbol on the plane that they had to change later on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like certain aspects of that, maybe was a little bit conflicting at the time.
Well, they definitely had to chop it up for the American audiences, and that dub, I do appreciate that there is like a full version of that dub, and we don't have to like have it where it's like partially subbed, or you can see the whole thing, and there were cuts, but it was restored, and the context is it's there in the manga as well that he did, the World War II manga. And you know culturally different, but There is a lot of that fairy tale stuff, and the it really rolls off the tongue, the Owen Stanley Mountain Witch of Space. That is one of my favorite lines from that movie.
It is, and I actually watched that movie probably at least 40 times. It's a masterpiece.
Yeah.
And each time I watch it, I just kind of understand the struggles between each generation of Harlocks,
Mm-hmm.
because it just kind of seems like there's so many similarities in between each one and what their struggles are, and it kind of seems like they don't fully overcome what they're facing, which is makes me wonder what the demise of Harlocks is. Probably, maybe he's going to have the same fate as his ancestors.
Well, did you watch the 3D Harlock movie?
I did.
I mean, so without spoiling that movie too much, I mean, Harlock is an Odin type figure, and that's made very clear in Harlock Saga, which is, did you watch that little short series?
I did not. I've seen most of the Hardluck series, the original.
Harlock. You said hard luck again.
Oh, yep, my bad. It's contagious. It's contagious.
I know. It's my problem. I'm trying to take accountability for it. Yeah, Harlock Saga is basically taking the story of the Ring of the Nibelheim. Which, are you familiar with the Ring Cycle? Richard Wagner.
No.
Okay, so Richard Wagner, very very famous musical orchestration, not quite an opera, but it's a story. It's very Germanic and features a bunch of Norse mythology, basically. And Matsumoto extremely enamored by this as a child and brings it into all of his stories. And Harlock has always been this character, but Harlock Saga is basically taking that and turning it into sci fantasy. And so he's basically Odin, and Odin sacrifices the eye to gain, I don't know, sight beyond sight or some shit. But he's like he's a little bit immortal. And the idea of Harlock being this immortal sufferer is kind of like, well, where does that story end up going? And it's not a good place. It's a dark place.
Yeah, I mean, we've always known Harlock for being like this two-dimensional character. He always wins, he's witty, he doesn't back down from a fight. We don't see a lot of fear in him. And there's very few works where we get to see this subtle change and his appearance to be actually human. So it seems like the further away you go with this character being human-like, the more I want to say gritty his character is. Like when he becomes immortal, when he take all that away, he just becomes this fierce character,
Did you
and you see that a
see
lot. And hmm?
did you see Endless oh my god. Rintaro little series they had, Endless Odyssey?
I'm almost done with that one. The SSX.
No, that's Endless Orbit SSX.
Oh, okay.
So there's another one called, it's got a really long name, and it was released at one point as a Herlock, not a Harlock. I don't know if you're familiar with that distinction. Um, Space Pirate Captain Harlock, The Endless Odyssey, and then there's it's called like Outside Legend, because Matsumoto kind of disavowed it, because originally the enemies are called the New, and they has Star Davids, and
Oh, geez.
you could say it's the Key of Solomon, but they're still called the News. Maybe it's an interdimensional threat, but Harlock in that is canonically fearless because they infect somebody. They've been infecting people with fear, and then they try to do their fear game mind break on Harlock and maybe a couple other ones, and they're like, oh, we actually don't have any fear. And then the New are like, no, they're fearless, and then they soon lose. So Harlock, no fear. And yeah,
Yeah, I mean, once you take all that away from Harlock, I mean, he becomes this unstoppable force, and whether that's good or bad, that's, up to what's going on in the story. I mean, we've seen that with the 3D Harlock movie, where
Hmm.
he's basically at his end. He's waiting for, the end of the world pretty much, and he's lost everything, and all he has is, time. So
The
once you take
fourth,
all that away, hmm?
it's the fourth dimension. I don't know.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, in that way, he's kind of a four-dimensional character because then he becomes fucking timeless. And honestly, my feeling about Harlock is I like him best. People say, well, what's my introduction to Harlock? Watch Galaxy Express 39. He's there. He's like one of the first characters that you literally see in that movie. And just in that poster. And then at the end, he comes and he kicks some ass and he's busting up robot men, and then he's flying his fucking Arcadia and busting ass and destroying, mechanized planets, and he's awesome there. And I think it's because he's better as this mythical orbiting figure instead of like the main drag. He's the best character internationally. Like that's who everybody recognizes. But as far as I'm concerned, he's not a great main focus.
Yeah, like even in his main series, the main focus was more so the kid
Mm-hmm.
that kept screwing up, the one with the same hairstyle.
And even
But
then, they were like, "Well,
yeah.
we've got all these other crewmates." They did a bunch of other side stories for them as well.
Yeah, he doesn't really work too well as a main character. He's better off as like a majestic side character that just swoops in and saves the day.
Well, even in the manga, you have all these sidebars with the quote unquote side characters, but again, that the surrogate is the boy, and that's true
Right,
in many
yeah.
Matsumoto tales. But you have all these sidebars like, who is he? What is he doing? Like they don't know. You're finding out about the character as time goes on, and you're doing it more so through the other characters than the main guy himself, who is, moody and secluded and hanging out with his computer too much. It's like, what's up with that? Why is the spaceship all autonomous and shit? You know?
Yeah. Another thing I wanted to talk about too, which I think is the most interesting of the Legiverse, is who exactly Maetel actually is. Like, we have an idea of what she might be and an explanation, but when you think about it, it's much deeper than that. Like, she holds the entire universe together in a way. Like, her identity is pretty much in every single one of the works, whether she's in it or not. And I think a lot of it has to do with how the movie portrayed Maetel, because every single work kind of has their own version of Maetel. But the more I watch the first Galaxy Express movie, the more I kind of understand what she actually is.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, well, she's like a fourth dimensional being.
well, it took me a while, and I think I cracked the code.
Well,
I
tell
think
me,
Maetel.
yeah.
Okay, so I'll give you a couple details on what I'm getting to, and then I'll tell you what I think at the very end. So Maetel, um, in an interview, I think in one of your podcasts, somebody asked a question to Leiji Matsumoto, like who Maetel is. And his answer was, there are many Maetels, other little boys in the universe, I think is what his answer
Mm-hmm.
was. And to me, that's like, okay, maybe she has like a lot of memories of being with a lot of people because she's been alive for so long. She's always on the train. She can live, what, 1,000 years? So that's my first thought. Now, we know that Tetsuro um, thinks that she's a beautiful woman, right? I read up to volume 13 of Galaxy Express. Nobody says she's beautiful. Nobody even bats an eye to her or even know who she is besides the main characters. But in the movie, there's a little scene every now and again that zooms into her eyes.
Hmm.
And in the movie, it means longing and deep sorrow. She's always mourning. But in the book, it's different. It has her eyes. It always goes to her eyes when she talks to somebody. But it's not mourning, it's them realizing who she is. Nobody knows who Maetel is until they look at her eyes and they remember. So it's got to be something much deeper than that. She's more than just an alien that's lived for 1,000 years. And then you look at the end of Galaxy Express, the movie, when she gets on the train and Tetsuro's off the train, and she says, you know, when you see me again, you're not going to recognize me, and I could be right next to you. So that must mean that she looks different to everybody. But Tetsuro says that she's beautiful, so maybe that's his version of seeing his mother.
Okay,
So I
so
thought,
yes, go. Go.
so when you add all that together, I think Maetel is the physical representation of your childhood, because your childhood will look beautiful to you, but not to someone else.
Well, there. I mean, it's definitely like in the poetry. It's in the prose. You know, a woman who travels across time. Um, you know, a distant memory of your. She says it. So a distant memory
Right.
of your childhood past. I mean, that is the most literal interpretation, I think, and it's probably extremely valid because it is the narrative implication that which, and I think that trumps everything else. That trumps all the sci-fi gobbledygook of it. That's Matsumoto taking this. Oh, this is an anthropological concept, not a. It's not sci-fi, right? It's what people believe. This is our memories. This is our past. There's a song by Nat King Cole. I think I dreamed you into real life, or something like that, right? It's how our emotions and thoughts manifest into reality, and what is kind of the drag on that is a bad interpretation on the past. An enhancement of that is a good interpretation of the past. How we process that and how that plays into, you know, the never ending journey with 3-9. I think
Hmm.
you're likely spot on. Uh, if we want to get into the
If you,
minutia of Maetel and who she is, that could be described very differently across all the different expressions. Um, you were gonna say something?
oh, I was gonna also add, if you look at it too, what other women has Tetsuro been around since his mom died? I mean, his mom to him is beautiful because when we're all that age, we only really know our mothers, and that's our level of beauty in our minds. And since his mom's gone and only has his childhood memories, of course Maetel would take the appearance of his mother because that to him is the peak of beauty, is his mom.
So, do you know my fan theory about Galaxy Express 39?
The one about Tetsuro dying
Yeah.
and walking up the stairs to heaven. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. This kind of, you know, dreamy interpretation that really could just be kind of like a little boy's final dream after being an orphan all of his life and then smacked to death. So she has that sort of Valkyrie quality about her.
Yeah,
And
we really don't know who she is.
Night on the Galactic Railroad is very inspirational to this movie. And you
Mhm.
know what that's about.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So it's a very similar idea. And he doesn't really get smacked up so much from what I remember in the manga. So it's a very different expression, and Rintaro and the idea of Maetel literally saying, I've got your mama body, I got your mom bod, is you know, different than the manga.
It's so weird because Maetel is actually a very rough, not rude, but she's kind of blunt in the manga, but she's very majestic and kind and consoling in the movie. So it's total
Mm,
opposites. It's really weird. She warms up to Tetsuro in the manga halfway through, but she's kind of like, follow me, do this. And she's doing everything
right.
herself.
Well, what is
In the
Mate?
movie, Tetsuro's doing it for her.
So Maetel comes from Mater, and Maetel is that's mom in Latin.
Yeah.
Mater. Okay, so Maetel is this degradation, and actually how it comes to be is that the original romanization is made out to be Maetel because that the person doesn't get the fucking reference. You know, they don't understand that this is obviously Mater. And Mater sounds like metal in Japanese. It
Mm-hmm.
sounds like meat. It also sounds like meter a little bit. And you're probably familiar with Leiji meters, right? All the
Yep.
dials and stuff that you see. So her name is a pun. It's like a triple layered pun. Mom, metal, meter. Okay, so meter being time. It's a measurement of distance. It's a meter being a measurement, but time is the implication here. So hopefully that blew your mind a little bit, right? Like this is every character in the Leiji-verse, not just Maetel. So
Right.
if you're curious, if you want to go deep on all of them, you could. So by the time this degradative, degradative. By the time it gets back to Matsumoto that it's Maetel, I had this inclination. I'm like, this shit sounds French. Maetel sounds
Mm-hmm.
French as fuck. So I said it to two Frenchmen in a podcast episode I did about Maetel. I said, doesn't Maetel sound kind of French, like Maybelle, Michelle? And they're like, I
Yeah,
don't know.
anything
I
that
don't.
rhymes with L.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And they were like, I don't know. They like totally blew me off, and they're like, I don't get. How do you not fucking get it? It's every fucking. Anyways, maybe it's racist, but Matsumoto's racist too because then he was like, it sounds French. There in his
Well,
one
the
of his
planet's
final
named La
published.
Maetel.
Exactly, but one of his final published articles, he was like, no, well, it still would have been Lamater, still, because there's an LR, there's no differential in Japanese. So the romanization, either way, it's the same. Maetel, Mater, they're Meteru, right? So they don't have meter Maetel. By the time he knows what the romanization is. Like, not everybody is privy to this. He knows what the differentiation is. And he hears it and he's like, well, it sounds French. And that's what he said in one of his final interviews. I didn't know that when I speculated.
I
don't
mean,
know.
it sounds better. Maybe he just did it because it sounded
Right.
better.
He literally said it's because it sounds French.
There we go. Yeah. I mean, it
I
works.
originally speculated this. He then said it in an interview.
Well, the planet's named La Maetel, so there's definitely a French aspect to it.
Well, yes. Okay, so that would be Maetel or whatever. But yes, so yeah, the implication is there, right? And it's La Mime, and there's a lot of laws for sure. But even then, there's the romanization. So it's kind of like this disparate idea that he's introducing to Japanese people, and he's completely limited in doing so because of their own phonetical palette. So it kind of even comes off as his own idea a little bit. You know, they don't preface things as ra. I don't know how do you pronounce ra in Japanese. I'm going to take a wild swing that that's it, but that's not law, you know, unless somebody's a French student and then they're like, okay, and then I understand. I don't know how many kids are taking French in Japanese classes. I don't know, but he's introducing all of these ideas in all these wacky ways. You got to remember, this is 1970, 1980. Japan is a much different place. You know, it's still much more affected by its island heritage, its isolationist heritage, than it is now.
Right. There's a lot. There was a lot more influence back then, and it was very restricted to go places. And he was very lucky to go to France and other places he probably has been to because it was an influence on his work.
Yeah, well, he went to France much later in life, and I believe his father went to France when he was a child. But he, the matter, the European matter that made it back to the Matsumoto household because of his father, I think is differentiating. And, then after World War II, everybody's like scrapping around looking for whatever they can find. You find some vinyl on the side of the road, you bring it home. That's like entertainment for the family for a week,
Right, yeah.
So that's apparently what happened.
Now, I do wonder which works he made in order, because I think on a podcast you also said that in the first movie, Queen Emeraldis wasn't. They weren't sure if she was going to be the sister of Maetel,
She was
but the
not.
second movie
No.
she was.
They were not related at that time. And I can't remember if by the second movie that's when it works out. I forget when the sister connection is officially made. I believe actually it might have been kind of spinning through the 80s, or dang it, when was the first time that you really know they're sisters? It might be I haven't thought about this particular thing in a while. So I'm actually stumping myself. I'm sorry.
Oh, you're fine. It baffles me too. I always have to think about it.
Because what I should have just spun into is that in Queen Melania, at least the movie and perhaps the TV show, but I haven't seen the TV show, to be perfectly honest. In the movie, Queen Melania, Yayao Yukino has a sister, Celine, and they are paired as a blonde and a redhead. And yet Yao Yukino is Queen Prometheum. Queen Melania is
Okay,
Queen
yeah.
Prometheum. This is originally turns into Maetel's mother. So there's a sister idea. It's kind of, I believe that kind of germinates with Queen Melania and what they're doing. But I can't remember the first time that Emeraldis and Maetel are sisters.
I'm kind of surprised. Usually Leiji Matsumoto has reoccurring things going on with family tropes. How Harlock is always falling into the same fate as his ancestors. I'm surprised he didn't try to do the whole one of the sisters turning evil, kind of like the Prometheum thing with Emeraldis, because she kind of strayed on her own path for a while and then came back into the story.
So thank you so much, Nemo X Serious, watching in chat right now, donating some bits. I really appreciate you. What I'll say about Maetel and Emeraldis is, I'm sorry, what were you saying?
Oh, I was saying I'm surprised he didn't try to do the whole Prometheum thing with one of the sisters kind of turning corrupt or going
Right.
on a wrong path with Emeraldis, because she's always been kind of like a loner.
So Emeraldis in the Harlock manga is imitated and destroyed. And then, but that's only in the manga, and that's her only appearance there. And actually, the Queen Emeraldis manga was running alongside the Captain Harlock manga, the original Space Pirate Captain Harlock manga. So he had both of these going at the same time, and Emeraldis actually shoots down a character that looks a lot like Harlock in an early issue in her manga. They're kind of referencing each other. And then in the Harlock anime, Emeraldis is pronounced Emeralda often. It's very distinctly not Emeraldis. And it's almost as if there's this implication that she might be not a Prometheus. Lamazone. She might be.
Oh, like a different appearance.
Yeah, she has, because there's this other redheaded chick that shows up towards the end of Space Pirate Captain Harlock in the anime, who's not in the manga, who looks a lot like Emeraldis. And Emeraldis is almost written like this sympathetic Lamazone or something, and it almost feels like Rintaro's about to do something really wild with her character, and maybe Matsumoto turned it down or something, because it feels weird. There's this 2-episode arc where they do the backstory and she's kind of chilling off in the background, and it's just all these tall redheads are these Lamazone, and it just seems like she might so the idea of an evil Emeraldus, I feel like that's kind of cooked for a while, but it never really manifested.
Yeah, it seems like her main, not purpose, but her reasoning for being there so much is for Tochiro's storyline, because it was important to get that out of the way before, the inevitable with being part of the ship.
Well,
And she kind of shows up.
in her manga and her OVA, Totoro is the object for which she is chasing.
Right, yeah.
She's on his trail, and there's this other little boy that she's kind of encouraging along the way. So she gets her own shine a little bit, but she also serves as kind of a counterweight to Maetel in Maetel Legend and Space Symphony Maetel, which are 90s OVA and series respectively, which I don't know if you've seen those.
Not so much. I don't think I've seen them yet.
So Maetel Legend is decried often because of its animation quality. It's like early 2000s Akira Tsuburaya. There's a whole video on him by Mercury Falcon that you might have watched, and he did a lot of production for Matsumoto properties for like that Gun Frontier cartoon and Cosmo Warrior Zero. Gun Frontier animation, probably the best out of all those, but the Cosmo Warrior Zero series does suffer notably in some places. But either way, I believe in Space Symphony Maetel she may be her most antagonistic, but they beef a bit on how to handle this mommy situation, because Queen Prometheum, mom's gone bad like milk.
You know what kind of like makes me wonder? I don't know if you read the manga for Galaxy Express Far, but it might be in the series. There's a scene where the Galaxy Express goes into what Matsumoto's version of hyperdrive or warp speed, where the train goes so fast it breaks time. And the Galaxy Express train from the future and the current day meet side by side, and they overlap time zones. And they're able to board that train because they both got mixed up. And Maetel was traveling with a different youth, far beyond Tetsuro's life span. And of course, Maetel knew who he was already for some odd reason. But why was she traveling with a youth when, at the end of the second movie, Emeraldus stopped her from getting on that train to break the cycle that she was on, this endless cycle of traveling with youths? Just makes me wonder.
Wait, okay, Emeraldus takes Arthur. So when you get into the intricacies of Galaxy Express 39, because I don't know, because all those episodes could be dissected on their own, firstly. I've only gotten through maybe 30, 40 episodes of the anime, and I've probably gotten a quarter of the way through the original series of Galaxy Express 39 in manga form. I've probably read the endings here and there. It's so dense, it's so crazy, and if you want to get it, if we get into that, well, then you have to also recognize there's Harlock and Totoro, which is a story which is like it's a novel that he wrote that's basically a grittier version of SSX, and then there's the Ultimate Journey novels, which are being adapted as manga, thankfully. But and that's wrapping up, which I'm glad it's getting finished because it's been on hiatus. But you know, there's writings to be discovered, and there's so much more stuff that it's hard to talk about any of it because it's just really, it's not super accessible. And when you get too into the details, how are we going to come to any consensus without knowing the full story? At least as, I want to know all of the works, but it may be impossible. I'd have to retire. I would have to be a retiree who just reads Matsumoto all day. If I could do that, great. I'll do it. Hopefully I live another 20 years and I'll get to do it. But until then, shit. Good question. I don't know.
Yeah, that's why I watched the movie. That's why I watched Arcadia of My Youth like 40 times, because I'll watch a series and then something will kind of throw me off and I'll have to stop to rewatch the movie. Like, for instance, in the Queen Emeralda series, I think the 4-episode series, uh, she mentioned that Tochiro made 5 Cosmo Warrior guns, or whatever they're called. In the Galaxy
Cosmo
Express
Dragoons.
Yeah, the Dragoons, yes. In the first Galaxy Express movie, that bandit only mentioned 4. So how is there a 5th one? Like, what storyline does that come from?
Well, that's
It
a
makes me
different.
wonder.
It's these differentiating factors are not conflictual if you accept Toki no Wa, which is Ring of Time. So if you accept how I have described how the LEIJI-verse actually works many times, then you accept that this is a differentiated expression of a timeless story. And this is a concept that Matsumoto became so ingrained in that it's baked into really eventually, once he really gets into his swing, even his breakthrough is Otoko Oiden. Are you familiar with that? I Am a Man?
I don't think so, no.
So Otoko Oiden is kind of an adaptation of his life coming to Tokyo as, I believe he did student work. I always get hazy on his student work, but he was, finding work as a shoujo artist, and he was living this life, is a bit destitute, and he saw a lot of people living destitute lives around him, and young Japanese men and women, and he kind of retells this story a few different times, and the second time he does it, it's a bit more child-friendly in the way that he tells it. The third expression is apparently the dirtiest, but the second one becomes like a breakout hit. And even going back to that, he later in life, he's illustrating Harlock next to this stubby little 1970s Japanese character, and he's telling you essentially, like, this is all part of the same expression of this universe that I've created. And why does this character look like this character? Well, here's the genealogy of Tochiro and Yuki. There are these opposing countries that are next to each other, and the Oyama clan and the Yuki clan. The Yuki clan makes these feminine, kimono-esque, garments, and the Oyamas are, smithing these warlord samurai armor outfits and swords, and they're these different landmass. It's baked into Japanese actual lore. Tochiro Oyama, Yuki, Yukino, or the Yuki name, whoever's using it, Yukimori. So it's baked. It's all these layers of time and space and history. And if you know enough about the man and his dearth of work and what inspires him, you see it in literally every single story. And you have to understand that this is Matsumoto crafted a timeline out of his entire universe of how he does storytelling. And it's systematic in a way, but it's so imaginative and freeing and wise and introspective and poignant that you buy it every time, even though it's kind of the same thing every time.
Yeah, it's like you said in a podcast once, how Matsumoto's not really big on not character development, but like a whole backstory that takes like 10 minutes to an hour to explain. He just kind of rolls with it and it just works. Kind of like the technology in the series. It just works. Like you don't
Right.
have to explain the scientifical explanation. It just works.
Well, there'll be moments of this Star Trekian sort of dialogue where he's like, he will explain it to you. So he has such a mastery over all of these topics, which is just this savant, like, this is why the comic book artist, even though comic books can be marred with all this stuff that, true blue artists will say, oh, well, there's perspective. And these people are such geniuses about, Matsumoto knows about everything from Wagnerian opera to classical storytelling to modern storytelling to how actual science works, not just science fiction, science fact. And his brother is a space engineer and he worked with him to say, hey, I made this design for a spaceship. Do you think this could work if, this is how I imagine all these parts? And he's like, yeah, well, I'm giving feedback and knowing, because he gave up the college money that the family Matsumoto had because he had these manga opportunities. He was getting called up to the majors by Tezuka. And when he was 18 to go, head out to Tokyo, do this work. And he's like, yo, bro, take this family inheritance essentially and go become a space engineer. And so he has such an incredible life. He knows so much about war and history and all this stuff. And he just interweaves it into this little fucking 20-page pamphlet, or 40-page, however long, of a little issue. And he can just put such a fucking spin on it. And it's the same thing every time, but every time it's still so beautiful. And that's the mark to me of just a fucking expert.
It is. I mean, he doesn't even have to try. He just combines everything together and it fits like a puzzle piece.
You kind of get it, and that's the exciting part of making my own comic when I wish I have what he had, and what does that mean? Maybe I had to grow up with a lot more trauma. Maybe I had to grow up with a family who had a few more resources before that trauma. You never know. We live very different lives, but it's been nice to at least, because as an artist personally, I never had somebody that I really looked up to in terms of like, well, this is what I want to do. And there's something so potent about what he did and what I learned about what he did and how he did it that I'm like, this is the right way. And everything you're telling me, and he's teaching me all the time after he's gone. And I just cracked open, I've read through about half of Queen Emeraldus, if not more, but I'm going to finally finish that manga. I finished the Space Battleship Yamato manga that he made. And I want to go through Emeraldus, and it may not finish. I don't know if it finishes hard, but I want to go on whatever, little stories and rides he has for me, because he's so, I'm so glad we have what he did.
I guess for like the final part of the podcast, I think the next topic would be basically his revamp of the series with the third movie after not making anything Galaxy Express related for a while. He released the third movie, and
Right.
I'm not sure if it's the storytelling or the character designs is why it didn't go so well, but I've noticed that a lot of his characters are very unique because they don't really express or say how they feel. You just kind of know. And the more time you spend knowing or being there, watching the character go through what they've gone through, you understand. Especially with characters like Maetel and Harlock, they're not gonna tell their life story. They're just gonna be there. And the more you spend watching them go through what they go through throughout the series, you kind of know.
It's interesting with that because it's supposed to lead into a series that we never got. And it's also interesting because instead of the first movie or the second movie, which are compiling, half a dozen episodes into a story, if not more, and there's a lot more to draw. There's a ton to draw from, but they do like 6 stories in Galaxy Express 39. I can't remember offhand, but you have the intro story, and then you figure out his backstory, and then these are all different manga issues. But when they're making that new one, they're only working from like, a 3, 4, and that's it. And there's something free about how they were able to do the first couple movies to tell these bigger stories and not have to worry about, well, what is this going to lead into? Because they were like, well, this could be it. So, throw it all in there. And even it's like, well, it's definitely it, because Matsumoto, at the time that movie's coming out, he's saying, I'm done with Galaxy Express 39. I've told that story. I've done everything I can do with it. I want to move on to Queen Melania. I want to do other things. And so, hard to recapture that magic, and maybe a bit misled, and maybe not enough kindling put in the fire before then to really make it pop off. If they had waited another decade and then done, I mean, God bless what we got. I'm glad we got that third Galaxy Express movie. But if they had done that third Galaxy Express movie after Daft Punk and Interstellar 4-5, could have been a whole different ballgame in Japan, at least.
Yeah, I mean, I've only seen the third movie twice, but the more I think about it, the more I think that it didn't follow the same formula as the first two. At the beginning of each movie, right? The first movie, what is it? Tetsuro's going onto the train with Maetel. The second movie, the conductor's putting Tetsuro on the train, and the third movie, Maetel's forcing Tetsuro onto the train. So they each get their own way of coming together. And at the end of the first and second movie, one person's on the train and the other one's not. And it's kind of like a perfect resolution to the end of the cycle of, the adventure. But at the end of the third movie, it doesn't have that. It's just kind of, what next?
Right. It's less of a compilation or concentration, and it's lost its visionary, right? It's not Rintaro directed. So that's problematic in and of itself. I mean, then we do get the Rintaro directed Harlock, and Matsumoto has to go public saying, like, I'm very sorry there were Stars of David in this. I disavow. This is not the Harlock I envisioned. It's like he's got to do all this PR maneuvering, which is unfortunate.
Now, I can't remember. Was Harlock even an appearance in the third movie at all?
Yes, because the giant battle scene at the end, which is a wonderfully animated. It's really fun. I like it a lot. I wish it was in an episode of the Galaxy Express. Toei wouldn't do it. They wouldn't commit to making like 13 episodes or something, which I think if they would have just said, okay, let's do the series and then see if we can do a movie after, like we did literally every other time. And they didn't have to make a 45 episode series. They could have made like a 12 episode series, but I guess it was too attractive to them to go movie format, which is lower cost and lower risk, I guess at that point.
Yeah, I guess what I'm trying to say through all this is I'm noticing a revamp of old animes being remade for the new audience, and it seems to be doing okay with some animes. Like Yuzuru Yatsura had a new version of their anime. They changed up the character completely, in my opinion. I'm not a fan of it. It's still good. It's just a little bit different for the new audience, and it gives me hope that maybe we'll see a fourth movie, or maybe a start of the first movie.
So Yurusei Yatsura, that's Lum, right?
Yes.
Okay, and it first comes out in 1978. Queen Emeraldus manga comes out in not 1998. Don't fuck with me here. It's got a very low rating on IMDb. I'm about to bash some heads in. I'm about to create some havoc in the internet community. 1978. I'm not really sure then. September. Don't have the date. It began in ended in 1979. So maybe I could work out the math on it, but the first episode of Queen Emeraldus, the first manga, has a nurse character in it called Lum, which I thought was really
Oh,
funny.
okay.
So that may be some sort of reference, some sort of hey, I see you, or maybe a grab. I doubt it was a grab. If they both came out in 1978, that seems unlikely because these things are in development for so long. But yeah, interesting fun fact.
See, they both have similarities too, now that I think about it. Yuzuru Yatsura is kind of technical, like it has its technology and space theme, but it's also very fairy tale like at the same
Yeah.
time. So maybe they piggybacked off each other with the characters and ideas.
Well, one other thing I didn't say about Queen Melania is that it's a sci-fi retelling of one of the OG sci-fi, which is a Japanese fairy tale called like something about the bamboo princess.
Right.
And okay, so you already know, and then it's like this moon princess come to Earth with these Japanese parents and this, series that happens there. So the fairy tale thing definitely, and Rumiko, huge fan of Matsumoto. It's pretty obvious. So, yeah.
I don't know, it just gives me hope that maybe, they'll look into maybe revamping the series or either explaining more or go more into depth on what's out there because we don't, like you said, we don't have the translations to know the whole story, but they
My
might.
my ideal is that they do a live action version of Mirazorban, Japanese, later dubbed.
Is that Leiji Matsumoto's work or is that
Yeah, Mirazorban is that one I talked about where it describes like this boy and his goes through time travel adventures and eventually discovers that, time is everything happening all at once. All possibilities,
see,
everything happening all at once, and he's just choosing a path through it.
that would be the perfect way to start the Leiji-verse, explaining that time travel is a concept and multiverses are a
Yeah.
thing, and then introducing one of his works and understanding that there may be conflicting, ideals.
Well,
So that'd be really cool.
if there is a potential IP for Toei to go, okay, we're gonna go Marvel style on this. We're gonna commit and we're gonna make something like we have this multiverse. If there's anything that's has the multiverse potential that's Japanese IP, it is the LEIJI-verse. Now, does somebody have the balls to do that without the wisecracking Stan Lee dialogue and the goofball bullshit of the Marvel movies and Disney? Could Toei do that nowadays? I don't know. Dragon Ball's way bigger than LEIJI-verse, but the thing is, you have to take what's funny about the LEIJI-verse and tell to a new audience, and I feel like people have a real difficulty doing that.
I honestly feel it. This is very controversial, but I feel like if they started with Gun Frontier, redo it, make it gritty, make a statement, just get away from the space stuff for a little bit because everyone kind of has that bad taste in their mouth from the whole Star Wars, thing. And just do your own spaghetti western. Just have fun
What
with
about
it. And
Dune
then I
though? People think Dune is okay.
do it. Yeah, Dune is good. It's different, like you can do so
That's what I'm
much with it.
saying. Yeah, like I don't
Yeah.
even think you're bound by that. Don't even do Mirazorban has puts people in a lot of like not sci-fi situations, even though they're doing it in a very sci-fi way. It's kind of like Doctor Who in that way.
Right.
They're not always running around Daleks, though they're there. You have an alien episode, you have this or that. That's why Mirazorban is kind of fun because it's like instead of Monster of the Week or Galaxy Express 39, it's like Planet of the Week. It's like Space and Time of the Week. Like that's just completely lift off all the boundaries of it, and it's super wacky. You could also there is a live action movie that could be dubbed or at least released in the United States based on that Otoko Oiden type story. It's called 4.5 Tatami Trilogy, which is, or sorry, 4.5 floor mat, great story, something. It's Japanese as fuck. But there are all these different stories, and you're right, not all of them are like sci-fi or sci-fantasy rather, but
Hmm.
you can work with a lot of his different themes across all these different other stories. I would love a live action specifically because you're not tying up an animation studio. They've done a lot of live action Galaxy Express adjacent stuff. There's been stage productions and there's been recordings and things like that. So I would love to see that instead of trying to do live action sci-fi, which is not to my liking. Do live action, IRL or practical stuff or something imaginative. Throw them back in time because they do like caveman shit and dinosaurs and you can have so much fun with that. I like Land of the Lost, the Nick
Right.
reboot.
Yeah. But I'm saying they could just do a Gun Frontier live action series,
That would be
just have
sick.
fun with it, and then go into Queen Emeralda's, have her have a proper movie, like a beginning and an end to that character arc. Because there's really no full arc for Emeraldas. It's just she's there.
I do believe things come to a head in the Galaxy Express novels, The Ultimate Journey, where like so, unlike a manga series where, when the publisher stops paying you, it kind of stops existing. You write a
Oh
novel
yeah.
and you're right, you write a novel and you put it out. So that's kind of where you find the most complete stories from Matsumoto. So she's in that. There is a giant climax, the metanoids, that everybody kind of has to face off against, and there's this big reunion and whatever. So everybody has in the Leiji-verse, and in at least that story, everybody gets like this wrap up sort of moment. Obviously, if they don't die in that battle, they're probably gonna live on, and yeah, could write another story from that. But there are conclusive things in the Leiji-verse. We just don't often get them for whatever reason.
Yeah, they just happen off screen or in between series, and like the whole transformation to Queen Prometheum. Like we've seen that in real time, but there's so much in between Queen Melania and Galaxy Express. There anything could happen.
Yeah, and getting the minutia. I mean, that's what they were kind of doing with Maetel Legend. If you're not familiar with Maetel Legend and Space Symphony Maetel, that's kind of that's at least one expression, an idea of what could have happened between those two implied points in space time.
Do they ever explain how Maytel gets a new body? Because that's always been so intriguing to me. How they explain that it's like a top tier technology of being able to replace your body like that. But I feel like she has a different type of transformation than what Prometheus has gone through.
Well, in the manga, she exposes herself to people and they like explode or they don't do well. It doesn't work out. So she'll like take off her coat and it's like this shining. And I think it's kind of implied. Like I've said, she's a fourth dimensional being. So what does that imply? She's a time being. And so
Well,
the body is not relevant to a time-based being.
I think a similar thing happened with her briefcase. Like somebody looked into it and they died like afterwards.
Yeah. Yeah,
There's got to be some kind of correlation.
it's kind of like Ark of the Covenant, sort of like, seeing the face of God, uh, and what is God and what is that greater force, and a God force coming through a divine feminine form is nothing new in the Leiji-verse. First, most strongly expressed in like season 2 of Space Battleship Yamato. Uh, and the Starsha and the what is their alien race called in Yamato? The ladies. I'm so sorry, I'm forgetting, but the Garmalos and the ladies. Did you see that? You know what I'm talking about?
I've seen some of the anime, but I've seen the movie mostly.
Yeah, it's just like there's a lot of divine feminine force and it representing this kind of god force and motherly creating force. I think Maetel is kind of an expression of that, just wrapped in a black fur coat.
And you see what I mean? How everything, no matter which part of the Leiji-verse you can, pick apart, it always goes back to Maetel. Like whether she's in it or not, like she just has like a blueprint of every one of his works. I think that character, either her or Hardlock, one of the characters, is his like masterpiece that ties everything together. It's like it's hard to tell which one's more than the other, but I think both of them are just kind of like the perfect representation of his like true masterpiece work.
Yeah, I mean, culturally, I think Maetel is even a little bigger than Harlock in Japan. Internationally, Harlock is bigger. So, but Galaxy Express 39 is just a little too Freudian for mass market appeal. So Japan, it just works perfectly for them, and Maetel is really big, and those two characters never really. They're both a bit orbiting, They're kind of like the orbiting mother and father, and Maetel, obviously, we've already discussed. Her name essentially means mother. So, and Harlock is a bit of an expression of Matsumoto's father. And you almost kind of feel like the boy character and Harlock are having, it's almost like Matsumoto imagining having space adventures with his own father, given the opportunity. So, and a mother and father do kind of orbit, or they helicopter parents, or orbiting is probably the best for what a parent does,
Yeah, I mean, if his father was in the military, what was he flying a plane?
Yeah.
Uh, he was probably not home that much. So obviously his mom and his dad probably never, were together all the time. So maybe he sees them as like distant, like they just cross paths.
Well,
They can.
after World War II, he never flew again. So, but there
Yeah,
was
after the whole Yamato thing, yeah.
but there was PTSD to deal with after that, I'm sure. So that might have caused its own unfortunate distance, and he was affected by those problems, and the melancholy from that leaks into the Harlock character as well. So
Yeah, there's just so much inspiration in his works that we just don't know, but it's like a what if situation, like his cat, um, Mikun, I think is the name. I'm reading the manga for Galaxy Express, and I think up to like chapter or book number 9 or 10 is when you first see the cat in the series. It's like what happens before that? Like we know his cat passed away and he kind of blames himself for not devoting his time to his animal. But you see in his works that these characters just appear and it's like that character is probably a part of his life. There's a whole story behind it and we just don't know.
well, he owned, I believe, 4 or 7. I can't remember. Probably some other number too. Uh, he had many cats that all looked the same, and when he got I don't know if he blamed himself. When a cat has cancer, you really can't do much about it, but he didn't go through the fuss of it, which is, you take your cat to the vet and then, they maybe suggest something, maybe don't, and you spend a bunch of money and then they die anyways, or the vet says, yeah, there's no hope here, and they die,
Mhm.
like it's not. But he didn't really take care of it. I think that's the shame of it. And it maybe happens suddenly, but yeah, so that's expressed in Space Battleship Yamato, and Dr. Sato has a cat, and he says goodbye to it, and like his final radio call to Earth, and this cat is just existing in an apartment full of sake bottles, but apparently it's gonna survive. So yeah, the Mikun thing and the cat tagging along, I'm not quite sure if there's huge significance to that. I actually wouldn't be as familiar with the cat episodes in the manga, so that's interesting.
Yeah, there's like a chapter where there's like a flying cat and a whole town of cats, and it just reminded
Nice.
me of the whole Mikun thing where there's a cat in every single one of his works. But before that, there was no cat mentioned. And it just kind of boggled me because it made me feel like maybe something happened in his life at that point that made him want to put the cat into his work.
Well, it's quite possible, you know. I'm sure after the first cat, he was a bit more attentive, but you know, after you lose, might have been four cats. I don't know, but you know, cats, you buy them and they die. You know, that's kind of what happens. And I'm sure that a version of Mikun, which he had very many, they were all called Mikun and they all look the same. So
Yeah.
he's a creature of habit. I will say, you know, a cat planet and a giant flying cat. The humor in Matsumoto's work is so understated in all the anime expressions that it really bothers me because he is so funny, and there are lines in Otoko Oiden and Meraser Bond that are just poignant and they hit so hard, and it's just these double entendres, triple entendres, these classical literature references that even a dummy can giggle at if you're you know, abstracting enough, if you're putting yourself in a more lucid mind state, which, you know, magic mushrooms were legal in the 70s in Japan. They were plentiful.
Oh, yeah.
And he was partaking. And if you've ever used them, you don't not laugh, hopefully. If you're if you're not laughing, it might be going poorly for you. So, you know,
I almost wonder if he put all his humor into the Tochiro character because I feel like every single time you see Tochiro, he's so loose, you know, he's not
yeah.
drunk, but he's like so carefree, you know, like he's gonna joke in the middle of a battlefield. And it's just I don't know, it just kind of makes me wonder if maybe that's his humor being put into a character just to get it out there.
Yeah, well, you know, he's inquired by Harlock in Arcadia, my youth. Why do you go about acting like a beggar? He says, you know, perhaps it's a one-man revolt. And I think that's what humor really is. You know, if you can bring levity to a situation or joy, which is upon meeting Harlock, that's one of the first things that happens. You know, they escape from a bar fight and they go, that was fun. You know, and he brings levity and joy back to, you know, even if he does some precarious things, some questionable things himself. You know, this is war is hell. These women have been fucking colonized by the fucking Illumidos. It's a tough time. He's gonna, you know, jump on a big lady's butt and grind a little bit, you know. So Tochiro, he's a wild man, but it's kind of it fits a need for humor. And like I
Mhm.
said, it is often understated in his works that you don't get to laugh enough.
And I think in Cosmo Warrior, there is a scene where they go onto a planet that's made of gold and they needed ship parts. And he runs into the ship because he finds out that cotton is really valuable and has a whole like pile of dirty underpants and just brings it to them. It's like, you know, like first they're thinking that they're gonna die because they're stranded. Next second, he's running outside with a pair of like a whole stack of underwear
Yeah.
ready to sell for gold. It's
Well,
like
there's jock itch cream branded with Matsumoto characters on it.
really.
And the idea of, you know, he said that he served Shitaro Ishinomori mushrooms that had grown on his underwear in his room
Oh
as a food.
goodness.
And, you know, it would attest to the filth levels in Japan just in general. I guess they all would kind of say like, you know, the mighty lion doesn't, you know, bathe in the jungle and yet he's still the king, you know. So they justified their poor bodily habits, and they're already artists and they're poor and they, you know, you couldn't afford to take a bath. So you know, they all kind of dealt with that in their own way, and it manifested through this underwear gag. And yeah, it's not, people don't really resonate with it as much, but I feel like if you told it the right way, if you kind of just understood the sensibility of the audience you're telling it to, and use the same mind frame, you know. The beautiful thing about Matsumoto's storytelling is and maybe I'm in a unique position to recognize this, but once you understand the patterns and mechanisms and background information and stuff, it's not hard to write how he writes, because it can't be hard because he did so much of it.
Right, yeah. It's a different perspective for sure, and we'll either get it or not get it. I mean, there's a different perspective on why he wrote it that way, for sure.
I think we'll get it someday, and I think somebody will kind of tap into it, and it's nice that we can tell these stories again and again and kind of see something special in them. I enjoy it.
Yeah, that's why, like, the more you watch it, like, something will click in your head, and
Yeah.
whether it be a voice line or a scene or something in the background. Like, for instance, uh, I think on a podcast, you said that the 999 resembles the last rotation, like a motif, of the beginning and end of someone's life,
Yeah,
and
nine.
I kinda I kind of understood that, but there was a little scene where, this is a spoiler for those who haven't seen the first movie. uh Tochiro's like dying on his deathbed, and next to him is a book, and it has 999 next to the book. And that kind of like clicked. It's like, okay, so anytime you see those numbers together, it means, life and death, like
Yeah.
reincarnation.
Yeah, well, Totoro is the reason why you know that Matsumoto isn't against all transhumanistic idea or expression in the universe. He's not against it. He warns about what are the problems, but the character that is most likely the expression of Matsumoto consistently throughout the story becomes part of a spaceship. He haunts a spaceship. And it's almost like he's telling you right there, I want to do this. You think I'm being critical of this idea? You think I am, because I want it to work, because it's awesome.
The fact that he predicted AI that far back in time, I'm just like baffled, because there's
Well,
this
let's be clear that he did not predict artificial intelligence. I mean, he's thinking about artificial intelligence back in that. And I think the concepts that he's pondering and going into and understanding, I mean, Tezuka was a doctor. Like,
Mhm.
these people were intelligent. These people understood these deeper sci-fi concepts, and I think most sci-fi authors do, and he expressed them very uniquely, but he didn't he wasn't forecasting AI or anything. I don't want to give that impression, or you to walk away with that impression. But he was thinking about these ideas in a very unique way, I think, and apply and using storytelling in a very unique way to communicate those ideas.
Yeah. Um, what I was saying too, to add on to that, because that's a good point, is he didn't create the idea of AI, but he thought about it in a new way for that time.
Yeah.
Like, say for instance, a lot of sci-fi robots are called robots, and they're fine with it. But in his universe, the robots don't want to be called robots. They want to be people, so they
Mm-hmm.
want to be called machine men, and they take offense to that. So that's like a deeper level of understanding on what AI can truly be in the future, and I think that's pretty unique.
Well, it's interesting because there's a distinction you can make where there are machine men, there are people who put their bodies into machines. There are manifestations of machine men which are like this living planet, they're connected to that, and maybe less so, and then like how many human souls are involved. But then there are also stories that he told about androids that are a little before Galaxy Express 39, where there's this little boy android and he becomes friends with Captain Harlock, and they bond. And so Harlock is good friends with a young, android boy who is not human in any way, shape, or form, who is more like that. But machine men, generally, you're referring to somebody who's put their consciousness into a machine. Now, how does that work? Very, very loosely described.
Yeah, like he doesn't have to explain the science behind it; it just
Yeah.
works.
Right. Yeah, it kind of gets you to the point where he needs to actually say, well, this is what I'm actually thinking about. All this other stuff before that, you might need an engineering degree to understand, but get to this point with me and let me talk to you about this, because this might actually impact your life or your children's life someday.
I think the most in-depth description of the technological side of how things work was in Queen Melania, and that's why that's my personal favorite series that he's made, because he goes all the way back to the ancient Egyptians with like his
Mm-hmm.
sculptures and how everything comes together and the asteroids. And that's when they first start explaining how the Lametalians have a shared knowledge of thousands of billions of years. You know, he explains all that, and it's like a background story to pretty much every one of his works. It's like a blueprint to how everything started, and I think that's really cool.
Hyperblocked in chat says Isaac Asimov, and I don't know what he originate, what I don't know exactly what he's credited with originating. I own one of his books on the New Testament. Ironically enough, I thought that was an interesting pickup, and I've never read it, but I'm interested. But I will say that what you're tapping into with the ancient alien theory stuff, I mean, this is all New Age stuff. And he's really into
Right.
aliens, and he owns meteors, and he's really into the idea of aliens and how that plays in with the New Age stuff. And Queen Melania is this weird New Agey expression, you know, trying to target females, and they're animated into this magical girl thing. But in the manga, it's more of this erotic spy thriller that turns into a more fantastical thing. Maybe not so much erotic, but it is it's a spy thriller. Sorry, it's based on, he did erotic spy thriller sci fantasy through something called Sexoroid previously. And Sexoroid really informs Queen Melania a great deal more than Galaxy Express 39, because there's a lot of intrigue. And I don't know if you've read the manga.
EA.
Yeah, with the Prime Gaming sub. Thank you so much, Hyperblocked. I appreciate you always showing up and supporting us. But yeah, I think that this, I'm sorry, but there's a lot of good ideas in LEIJI-verse. What was I talking about? I'm losing it.
You're fine. You were talking about like Leiji Matsumoto taking references to a lot of things going on around his time, like the asteroids and
Well, New Age theory in the age of Aquarius and like this 70s stuff, and everybody's doing mushrooms. Are you familiar with, like, you watch spoopy YouTube videos? Don't you know much about Thoth?
Thoth.
The Emerald
Is that a
Tablets?
cryptic? Is that a cryptic or
No, not so much. It's more like, it's kind of ancient alien theory. It's new agey. There's these, you know, people that come down to Earth, and there's Merkabahs and force fields and levels of consciousness and giant humans, and there's a lot of less scientific stuff, woo-woo metaphysical ideology that goes into Matsumoto stuff. And the Hebrews are involved, and the Merkabah looks like a Star of David. So
oh my goodness.
Matsumoto might have sown some of his own fate there when Rintaro would later come to, you know, express these ideas, and then he goes, "Why, you did it first." I mean, you know, it's but New Age stuff, I want to send you a video, and it's a really long video, and it's by this guy who is no longer on the internet in any way, shape, or form, because with the people he was associated with, I wouldn't blame him for running away. But it's interesting. Look up Ancient Alien, New Age theories someday, and they might surprise you.
Now, I do watch a YouTube channel. I can probably link you his channel. He's really into the alien community, but he basically tries to debunk scam artists, you know. But they've talked about the tablet before. I don't think anybody's ever seen it because it's not, one, it's not legible, and two, it's probably massive. So it's made out of stone.
I'm interested you didn't say it wasn't real. So I'm
Oh,
curious.
it exists. It's
Okay.
probably in the ocean somewhere, to be honest.
Probably in the ocean. You know what, though? We could say that about it. Where, Mr. McGillicuddy, where's your homework? It was due this morning. It's probably in the ocean, brah. Oh, I can't dispute that. Actually, it's in the ocean.
I mean, if you think about it, there was this one article. I'm obsessed with this. They found a computer that's probably billions of years old, and this computer is basically a bunch of rusted cogwheels, like shaped like a giant circle, and nobody knows how it works because it's so rusted. It's You can take it apart and still not know how it works.
Yeah.
But they predicted that this thing can know exactly where the stars are going to be every single day. So if you want to know where a certain star is going to be 20 years from now, this
Mm.
device will show you. So it's kind of like, what was the technology back then?
Have
You
you
know,
ever heard of
you,
spirit science or spirit verse?
it sounds so familiar.
I know, right? So, this stuff has been pilloried to death, and it's funny because it's wacky as hell. But I'll tell you what, I grew up in the church. I know how to accept wacky lore. If people think wild shit's going on, that's okay. It's to me, it's about the end result. Okay, we have this wacky lore. Now, what are we gonna do with it? Are we gonna turn it into a cool comic book, or are we gonna try to take advantage of a bunch of vulnerable, neglected people in Los Angeles with the Church of Scientology? So what it's what are you gonna do with your wacky lore? That's how I feel about religion.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty spiritual myself. The way I see religion is very different from what other people
I
do. I don't.
misspoke. I misspoke. Just I didn't mean religion. I meant spirituality. I meant like because I feel
Yeah,
like
yeah.
spirituality and lore are connected.
Right. I think religion is a similar story with a different perspective because everything's in all religions. It's basically a different
Yeah.
story, or same story told in a different way, but the difference is what you get out of that story. Like what does it mean to you? And that's the importance of it. And I'm spiritual, so I mean, I'm very optimistic. If the aliens came down from the skies tomorrow, it's just another day for me. I expected it. It is what it is.
There's I guess nowadays they're calling them like non-nons or nuns. They're not religiously affiliated, or it's just like everybody. I talk to so many people, and I feel like everybody has this extremely similar idea of how things work. When then just a few tweaks in here and there, when you really get into it, the lore and what people think is right and wrong about whatever story is being told, it's all inconsequential because when you get down to the metaphysics and the actual functioning, there are all these religions and they're so story based that they almost can't be divorced from it. And whatever they believe metaphysically and operationally are so schismed on top of that wacky story stuff. When people stop talking about stories and talking about like the mechanism of metaphysics, I feel like you only have a few options. You either see life as a curse, or it's some sort of test, or everybody's one, or we're schismed, or the world is evil. Maybe there's a handful, but when you put all these wacky backstories on them, that's when they get hard to. We're all talking nonsense with lore and stories, but when you actually talk about the mechanics of how your religion works, that to me means more, and nobody's talking
Mhm.
about that, so I just do it on my own.
I also think the key to everything is travel. Travel, get as much culture
Yeah.
as you can into you, because once you see those pyramids up close, man, you have some questions going through your mind for sure.
So you've seen the pyramids.
I wish. I haven't been
Okay.
outside the country, but I've
Yeah.
always wanted to.
All I've been to is Mexico. I went to Ensenada, Mexico in high school for a little mission trip, so it was good to see the Pacific and eat some fish tacos. But yeah, one day I'll get out to Europe or Japan or something like that, and maybe see the motherland. Go to Italy. Hey, we Sopranos. I'm walking here. I'm walking on this homeland. Yeah.
Yeah, Italy's nice. I like Greenland and um well, I have to explore more. There's a lot of countries I'd like to go to, but probably now's not the best time.
I am not a Mormon, if you're asking in chat. I am not a Mormon. I just live amongst the Mormons. And, you know, if anybody tells you I'm Mormon someday, just know the church made me an offer I couldn't refuse. That's what it came down to. If anybody tells you I'm Mormon someday, I said, hey, when in Rome, you know.
Hey, it's never too late to, find your beliefs and get your goals in check and just have fun. I
Dude,
mean,
Mormons, they come from Joseph Smith. My dad's name was Joseph. There's another guy named Joseph Campbell who came up with another Christian offshoot that was really popular at the time. I'm close. Like, I feel
it's
like
written
my
in the
name,
stars.
it's written in the star. Hey, JC, Jim Caviezel, Jesus Christ, Jacob Campbell, put it together. That's me. I'm here, and I'm going to write the new religion for everybody. So keep an eye out. That's my next Kickstarter. I'm kickstarting the next religion.
There you go. You're gonna find the tablets. You're gonna start it. The aliens are coming. They're coming.
Yeah, in your face. They'll get you. Watch out. Watch out for that. Am I keeping you way longer than you thought you'd be on here? You good or what?
Oh no, you're good. I'm having fun.
All
So
right.
I
Yeah.
love talking about this stuff because you can go on forever and talk about anything with this kind of stuff, and I'm really into it. I like hearing other people's opinions because nothing's wrong, nothing's right. We're just here living the dream.
Well, moral relativism will get you anywhere. Is truth either truth is relative or I'm God, you know, to quote Community. I don't know if you've ever seen Community.
I've seen some of it, yeah.
I'm rewatching the whole series right now. Finally, I gave NBC 3 of my dollars, so now I gotta follow through with that. But yeah, I don't know. I didn't mean to put brakes on the whole thing or not. I'm getting way more tired than I thought. But did you have any other questions you wanted to ask, or
No, I think we covered pretty much everything that was on my mind. Next time we can totally get more into the alien stuff or the OG anime conspiracies, all that fun stuff. Because I know there's so much to talk about when it comes to like what ifs with anime. Because back then, there was so much going on behind the scenes with the animators, the stories, spin-offs.
yeah, there's a lot of shit going down back then. But we could also talk about the IRL lore. We could talk more about. We'll talk about ancient aliens next time and ghosts.
True. Yeah, there's so much to learn. Like I don't know a lot about the lore. I only know conspiracies. So it'd be really cool to see that real life stuff.
Well, maybe you'll talk about Ghost on the next. We'll have Ghost versus Aliens. Ghost. I probably know more about ancient aliens than you, and you probably know more about ghosts than me.
Oh, I know a lot of scary stuff about ghosts.
Yeah,
That's my specialty.
yeah. You've got the spook lore. I've got the extraterrestrial lore, and we'll come together, and we'll do aliens versus ghost. I think aliens versus ghost. That's a concept that really hasn't been tapped into enough. Like, what if a specter haunted a spaceship that was full of aliens and not humans?
I mean, the closest that would be shadow people. They're not human, but they think they come from other worlds, kind of like aliens. We never
Ah,
talk, you never see alien ghosts, but there's shadow people that resemble similar things. Like they come and
ah.
take your body and you disappear once they get you. And there's no running from them. You just live with them
Yeah.
and
Well,
they just wait.
what
It's
is life
creepy.
and what is life and death to the interstellar being? You know, what is? Are
Uh,
they able? Do they have the same life and death by that point? By the time you're able to jump between galaxies, is that even what you're doing anymore? Living and dying?
I don't know. I guess that's a question for the next podcast.
Yeah, I think so too. I think so. Gothy, did you want to plug or talk about anything? Because I didn't really give you the time or space to do that up front, but at least on the YouTube release, you'll be tagged and stuff. So,
No, I think we covered everything that was on my mind. I'm happy to be here and glad to, start the first podcast with y'all.
Well, everybody should be following you that's watching right now and going out and are you still going to be streaming here pretty soon?
Yeah, I'm gonna be streaming Outlast 2 as much as I can. I don't know how good I'm gonna be at the game.
And if that makes it onto YouTube, I'll try to get people to go into that too. But yeah, go check out Gothy and follow their stream and subscribe to them and support everything that they're doing because they support everything that I'm doing. And I just want to say thank you again. And heck, maybe some of these clips will end up making it on the LEIJI-verse channel or something because this is the LEIJI-verse episode of the podcast, which was an inevitability, but it's always fun for me to get to spin my yarns and flex my dearth of trivial knowledge. So
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, thanks again.
All right. Well, thank you guys for everything. I had fun, and I'll see you on the next podcast.
Later on, Gothy.